What is the worst lie you caught your parents telling? That the $2,000 I earned at my summer job would be safe in my mom's savings account until I wanted to withdraw it later. Never saw that money again. That my mother was schizophrenic. I was 15 and knew she had been battling depression for years. Schizophrenia runs in our family, and as an angsty teenager it was very easy for me to believe that she was crazy. She was completely convinced that my father had a secret second family. She was diagnosed and medicated for years. He did have a second family. That they couldn't afford to pay for college. So I took a job during the day and paid my way through night and weekend school. Turns out I had a decent trust fund from my grandfather. I could have graduated and started working for a higher wage 4 years earlier. I tell myself that graduating in 2008 wouldn't have been a good idea anyway. Up until I was 8 years old, they told me that Daddy was away at college. We would go see him on weekends. Found out later that he was in prison. I wondered why we could only talk to him behind glass on a telephone. I won't get mad at you. My dad used to tell me that he learned all of his cool tricks and skills in Daddy school. I'm now 28, married and still have not been enrolled. Found out when I was 25 I have a sister 1 year older than me that they gave up for adoption. I'm 37 and been searching for her for the past 10 years. They told me if I was lying there would be bubbles on my tongue. So when they asked me something and they thought I was lying, they'd tell me to stick out my tongue. If I knew I was telling the truth, I'd open my mouth confidently and show off my bubble-free tongue. If I was lying, I'd try to scrape the bubbles off with my teeth. I now use it on my son. Still works. Is going to hurt me more than it will hurt, right? My mother lied to me about wanting to divorce my father. Long story short, he molested me as a child and I didn't come out about it until I was an adult. After a very long and drawn-out legal process, he finally went to jail in March of this year. My mother said when it comes down to it I will always choose you. I told him I wanted a divorce. Just for me to find out she calls him on an almost daily basis while he is incarcerated. I firmly believe she lied to me to make me feel better and has no intention of leaving him. When I turned 5, my mom told me that my dad sent me money to buy a bike from prison for my B-Day present. He didn't, she just didn't want me to forget him, so she gave him credit for it. My dad went into the ER with stroke-like symptoms. He ended up having a severe brain bleed that required immediate and major surgery. While he was laying in the ICU, my mother, who opened their computer to get insurance info, found messages on his LinkedIn page that he'd left open earlier that morning before I took him to the ER, from a woman he was engaged to in college. They had been having an affair for over a year. When my sibling and I were young, we were tossing toys around that the Easter Bunny had left for us. My mom started yelling at us, "I did not buy those for you to treat them like that. That kids in Africa are dying if I don't eat my whole plate." Driving with the interior lights on in the car is illegal and dangerous. We are going to Denmark for only a month. We are still here after 4 years. My dad told me that every pickle you eat adds 5 minutes on your life. I was like 5 and damn did I ever take that to heart. I love you. That's normal sibling rivalry. No, it wasn't normal. You guys just didn't want to deal with shit, and the shit you caused by setting up a situation where you pitted my older sibling against me and then punished me when I fought back. When I was 4, we had a dog called Tilly. My mom said that she gave her away to a boy who couldn't speak and she died while saving him from drowning in a river. Years later, when I was around 13, my mom was on the phone to her friends and they were talking about their pets that passed away. Turns out that Tilly died because my mom was drunk and let her out the house. She ended up getting hit by a car. If you go to a private college, we'll pay all your tuition. Got accepted to an amazing private college, handed them the bill and... No, not like that. Needless to say, I did not go to that amazing private school. 23 years later and I'm still bitter about it. That I was planned. The worst lie? I was diagnosed with a chronic cancer at 16, and my mum got drunk and told all of my friends that my doctor had told her that I only had a year to live. Found out through my friends when they started giving me excessive condolences. Emailed my doctor, he never said that. Still don't know why mum did that. My main theory was that she was scared. My mom tried to tell my daughter, at my dinner table in front of my husband and I, that I had wanted to get married in her backyard. This was an attempt to validate her taking over my wedding and ruining it for me and to back me into a corner and agree with her. Hubs and I shut that down real fucking fast. I would hide in the pants jeans displays at Walmart as a child. My mom told me, you know how they make shorts, don't you? A man comes by with a chainsaw and cuts the pants into shorts. If you're inside the rack, he will cut you in half. They told me the burnt pizza was just brown cheese. Every time a tooth fell out, a fairy would buy it for 50p, providing I left it under my pillow. I always wondered what these fairies did with all these teeth. My dad said they eat them because they need lots of calcium to make their wings work. You will break the PC if you touch the mouse during boot. They lied to me about my dog going to school, but it turns out his dead pensive face. Not terrible, but my dad was a rock drummer for 20 years from late 70s to late 90s. He claims to have never been drunk or stoned. I've personally smoked and drank with his old band members who claim that he's full of shit and got really disappointed when I told them he said that. I thought they'd be like, yeah, your dad was a square but we love him. Instead they were like, damn, he said that. We have McDonald's at home. We moved when I was 4, and we didn't bring my parents' 5-year-old cat with us. When I asked, they said they put her in a shelter and she'd be fine. Some little old lady would probably adopt and coddle her. They euthanized her. She was perfectly healthy, and they didn't even give her up to the shelter. They just straight up had her killed because she sometimes had hairballs. My mom told me that it would take 1,000,000 days to drive from Minnesota to New Hampshire. The whole story about Sinterklaas, the Dutch equivalent of Santa. When I was 8 years old, I was devastated when they confirmed my suspicions he doesn't really exist. Not so much because of the fact he isn't real, I had figured that out on my own, but because they had lied to me. For years I couldn't believe how parents can justify it to themselves to blatantly lie to their own children, and promised myself I would never do that. But then my daughter was born and I happily told her the same lies. Oh, the hypocrisy, smiling face with open mouth and tightly closed eyes. That they cared about me. More of an omission, I was shooting the shit with my grandmother. I can't remember what she was talking about, but she related it to my mother's fight with breast cancer the year prior. Fight with breast cancer? I just nodded like I was in the loop. I guess it makes sense why I'm so reluctant to open up to people. Look who built me, lol. Nothing too outrageous, but my mom would tell me some things were a sin if she didn't want me to do them for some reason. Including going to the bathroom before eating in the morning. I was told my mother died. 40 years later, I get a call and was asked if I could help with my mother's funeral expenses. Needless to say, I was shocked. She had schizophrenia, spent her whole life in a mental institution. Which I passed that gene to my son. It still weighs on my mind. I could have went to visit her. Was she lonely? It saddens my heart still. Hiding an older half-brother from my sister and I. Forced me to go to college when I didn't want to. Did horribly, by the way, and told me that they had no money for a deposit to secure my place in housing. And then went out and bought $500 worth of decorations for the house. There was much underage drinking that night. I drank so much wine from being so angry that they knew how the world worked. None of this will matter in 10 years. 20 years later, it still fucking matters. Not the worst one, but my mom once told me that if I stared at an object for long enough, I would be able to move it with my mind. I once stared at a candle for 4 hours. Fat old geezer breaks into the house, eats the decent snacks, empties his sack in the living room, then fucks off to another kid's house. Was told my mom had all these severe health issues for years, spent a lot of my childhood worried about her being in and out of the hospital. It was actually a debilitating heroin addiction that eventually made us homeless. Dad will be home soon. I gave 4 kilograms of rice to the kind lady who introduced you to us. Be happy that we brought you into our lives, Dad said with a smile. After studying life processes in 9th grade, I realized that children are not bought for rice. I know the truth.